Pleasure to welcome you to this book launch ceremony. I must say, looking at this room and seeing so many old and dear friends in this room, I'm really very happy that all of you, despite your busy schedules and many demands on your time, you've come for this book launch today, and I'm truly grateful. But I'm especially grateful to one man, Professor Tommy Koh, who has agreed to be the guest of honor. And it is truly a real honor to have Tommy as the guest of honor, because he's truly one of Singapore's legendary figures. Now, you may have just discovered it, but I discovered it 31 years ago when I had to step in his shoes as a Singapore ambassador to UN. I was then 35 years old. And I thought that was really mission impossible, because he had already by then completed his chairmanship of the Law of the Sea Conference, and frankly created a convention that has changed the course of world history. We all, as you know, worry today about what's happening in the South China Sea. We know that it's not going to be easy to resolve the South China Sea issue. But can you imagine how difficult it would be if Tommy Koh had not succeeded with the Law of the Sea Convention many years ago? And after that, of course, he went on to become chairman of the Rio Conference on the environment. So Tommy has done amazing work in the course of his career. And I can tell you that many years later, when I saw Mr. Goh Chok Tong trying to step into the shoes of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, I said, I know what that is like. I tried to step into the shoes of Tommy Koh. So a special round of applause for our guest of honor. Come on. Now, Tommy is both a friend and a guru. And as a guru, he taught me one very important rule in life, which is that when you stand up to speak, only make 3 points. So I'm going to answer 3 questions with my 3 points. The first question is, of course, why did I produce this book? Second question, what is the answer to Can Singapore Survive? And 3, what can we do in the future to actually help Singapore survive? And I'll try to answer these 3 questions in 10 minutes or so, and that'll be followed by Tommy Koh saying some remarks, and hopefully after that we will have a dialogue with you all. We should be followed then by a small reception, a modest reception back there, where you can also buy some books. So let me answer the first question, why did I write this book? The simple answer is that, as you know, Singapore is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. And amazingly, even though we have had 50 amazing years in Singapore, when we should actually be having a happy celebration this year, as you know, the mood is not one of total celebration. And many people in Singapore, sadly, do not understand one basic, fundamental fact about Singapore, which is that our first 50 years have been exceptional by any global standards. In fact, sometimes I say rather provocatively, in a remark that upsets, I can tell you, my fellow professors at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, I say, not since human history began has any society improved its standard of living as comprehensively and as rapidly as Singapore has. And I state this as a fact. And I say, if you think I'm wrong, challenge me. Give me another example of any state since human history began that has had this amazing transformation. And the answer is that no one has done it. So, but it is wonderful that we've had this exceptional track record. But the trouble with this exceptional track record is that it is exceptional. And exceptional, as you know, is a deviation from the normal. And as a student of history, I can tell you, over time, history removes the exceptional and brings you back to normal. So Singapore, in the next 50 years, cannot be an exceptional state. Singapore will be, and probably will, like most other states, be a normal state. And the strange thing is that since the major transition is coming, so few people are preparing for it. I mean, if you look around and you want to know what normal is, look at every country around this region. Look at South Korea. After a very strong government, you had political instability, you had presidents going to jail. Look at Japan, you had an LDP party running for so many years, and then boom, it's gone. Look at Taiwan. Look at our region. So it is so unusual to have such continuous political stability and economic growth. You can see. So we will go back to the normal naturally, because normal is natural, and the question is, are we prepared for it? So that's why I said maybe it's time to produce a book that will get Singaporeans to reflect on what it is like when we become a normal state. So the second question is, can Singapore survive? And as you all know, I did give a clue to what the answer is in the Straits Times article that came out on Saturday. And of course, the honest answer to the question, can Singapore survive, is nobody knows. The future is always unpredictable. But the probability, clearly, in fact, the massive probability is that Singapore will survive. And I give the reasons why I think Singapore will survive. They're very easy to bear in mind. Firstly, we have invested so much in Singapore. Not just in developing the physical infrastructure of Singapore, but we've invested so much in developing a human infrastructure in Singapore, which is one of the strongest and most resilient in the world. I mean, the collection of talent that we have put together in key institutions is something that other countries are very envious of. This is a remarkable thing we have done. And in our region, Southeast Asia, which was regarded as the Balkans of Asia, when Singapore became independent in 1965, was a region of instability, has now become calm and, relatively speaking, peaceful. So that's another way that Singapore will survive. And the third reason why Singapore will survive is that, by good fortune, the center of gravity of world history is moving towards East Asia. So the 21st century will be the Asian century, and when it becomes the Asian century, you will need to have an Asian city that will serve like London, in a sense the capital of the European century, or New York, the capital of the American century, and the only city that can realistically serve as the capital of the Asian century is Singapore. So that's a tremendous opportunity that Singapore has. So for all these reasons, as I say, the massive probability is that Singapore will survive. But there is always a possibility that it may not survive too. So that too we can expect. And there will be all kinds of challenges coming our way in the years to come. Just to give you one example of a geopolitical challenge that is coming, which will be normal, is of course the relations between the world's number one power and the world's number one emerging power. The world's number one power is the United States of America. The world's #1 emerging power is China, and last year China surpassed the United States in PPP terms. Now, when that happens, traditionally, you should be seeing rising levels of tension between US and China, but we're not seeing it. We're seeing a geopolitical miracle unfolding before our eyes. So, this is again abnormal. The abnormal will revert back to the normal. We may have enhanced geopolitical competition between US and China, and the one country that will have the hardest time dealing with geopolitical competition between US and China will be Singapore. Why? Because on the one hand, we are a very good friend of America. Indeed, we have been a solid friend of the United States, working with the United States in defense, in trade, in investment, in so many areas. But we also have close ties with China, and we have a population that is 75% Chinese. So if there is a split between US and China, the hardest thing for Singapore will be to make a choice. So that's why we need to worry about these things happening. And the question is, are we resilient enough to handle that situation when it comes? That's why I say we must have doubts about whether or not Singapore can survive. But of course I conclude by saying maybe Singapore can survive, and with that I basically give a series of prescriptions of what we can do to make Singapore survive better. And probably the most controversial suggestion I make in that maybe scenarios is that if we want to ensure that Singapore survives, what we need to do is to create a big tent approach in Singapore. Have a more inclusive society, not just an inclusive society in economic terms, but also a more inclusive society in political terms. And this is what the founding fathers of Singapore did. In fact, I give examples from this book of two of my famous colleagues, one whom I succeeded, Tommy Koh, one who succeeded me, Chan Heng Chee. Tommy Koh and Chan Heng Chee were very strong critics of the Singapore government. And so was I. I actually reprint in this book an essay which I wrote as a very young man in 1969 called A Question of Decorum. And frankly, when I read it now, I'm amazed that I wrote it. So one reason for buying the book is to read that essay. But we have to now. I mean, as Singapore changes, as a more middle-class society emerges, it's natural for the political environment to change. And the best way to handle this new political environment is to make it as inclusive as possible and bring in people like the old Tommy Kohs and Heng Chees, or even people like Minister Vivian Balakrishnan and others, Raymond Lim, who were critical of the government, bring them in and make them part of the governing process of Singapore. And that's a concrete recommendation I have in the book too. So finally, just to conclude, because I realize I'm exceeding my time, I also believe that all of us, in our small individual ways, can make individual contributions to making sure that Singapore survives over the long run. So from my point of view, what we've tried to do at the Lee Kuan Yew School is to launch something called the Singapore Futures Project. And the goal of this Singapore Futures Project is to write a series of policy briefs on some of the challenges that Singapore is going to face, discuss them, discuss what we should do about them, the different approaches, and hopefully then, as a result of that, of producing those policy briefs, we will then have a citizenry that is psychologically prepared for new challenges that are coming Singapore's way. and will then see that they have at their disposal policy briefs that analyze and dissect the problems that may be coming Singapore's way. But I also mentioned this Singapore's Futures project for a very important reason, because some of you may know that in my day job, I'm sometimes known as a professional beggar. So since the Singapore's Futures project is a project eminently worth supporting, I hope that some of you tonight will also support it. So thank you very much. And with that, can I invite Tommy Koh?
I want to thank Kishore for his generous words and for giving me the privilege and honor of launching his 5th book, Can Singapore Survive? I've known Kishore since his student days. He was a brilliant student. He was also a student leader, and I might add, quite fearless too. He was the editor of the student newspaper, The Undergrad. I was then the legal advisor of the student union, and one of my jobs was to keep Kishore and his fellow student leaders out of trouble with the government. In a funny way, I can say that I've been trying to keep him out of trouble ever since. Kishore is a poster child of Singapore's meritocracy. His life and career is an eloquent testimony that meritocracy works and the Singapore dream can be achieved. He was dealt a very tough cut when he was young. He was born into a very humble family, and his father was addicted both to alcohol and to gambling. And it was the mother who raised the 4 children. Against all these odds, Kishore was a brilliant student and won the most prestigious scholarship of Singapore, the President's Scholarship. I don't know whether those of you who are non-Indians know that Kishore is a Sindhi. And the Sindhis are famous for their business acumen. Somehow, Kishore didn't inherit this gene. He decided to study philosophy, which, as you know, has very little market value. But he did very well. He graduated with first-class honors in philosophy, and he joined the Singapore Foreign Service. He performed brilliantly as a diplomat and rose through the ranks to achieve the highest position achievable for a Foreign Service officer, that of the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In his second incarnation, he has been the outstanding dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. In a very short space of time, he and his colleagues have put the school on the world's map as one of the most respected schools of public policy. He has even outperformed the legendary Jenny Chua in fundraising. As a result, under his able leadership, the school is financially rich and intellectually solid. I think I am not wrong in saying that after Lee Kuan Yew, Kishore Mahbubani is Singapore's most famous and influential public intellectual. He has been selected both by Foreign Policy and Prospect as one of the world's leading thinkers. And I should say that it always amazes me. He is so eloquent that American audiences actually pay him to listen to him scolding their country and pronouncing that America is in terminal decline. It's amazing. The title of the book, Can Singapore Survive, is meant to be provocative. However, as the former Foreign Minister George Yeo said in his blurb, despite his seeming pessimism, Kishore is in fact more optimistic. Underlying his questions and doubts, one can detect a certain faith in ordinary Singaporeans beyond politics. Despite its title, this collection of essays gives a hopeful view of Singapore's future, unquote. I agree with George Yeo. Kishore loves Singapore and he believes in Singapore. However, like many thoughtful Singaporeans, he's worried about our future. He wonders whether success has made us complacent and we will suffer the fate of the great American company Kodak. He worries that our success has made us so conservative and rigid that we are unwilling to slay any of our sacred cows, such as the 3/4 tank rule, or to embrace the new, such as the Tesla electric car. He worries that our policymakers may have lost the verve and daring of our founding fathers. In one of his provocative essays, Kishore asks, and I quote, how many of the assumptions in our minds are still influenced by the Reagan-Thatcher revolution? And if we find some, how do we scrub them out? Unquote. I have a question for you, Kishore. Do you think our decision to corporatize and privatize our public transport system is a legacy of the Reagan-Thatcher revolution? And if it is, how would you reorganize our public transport system? Kishore likes to describe himself as a Marxist. Well, whether Marxist or not, he's clearly a man who wants Singapore to be more egalitarian, one of his essays, to be kinder, and to be more philanthropic. I think most of us, if not all of us, share those aspirations. As for the question, can Singapore survive? I'm more optimistic than Kishore. And I should explain that this is due to our different genetic heritage. Kishore is a born pessimist, and I'm a born optimist. I do not agree with some older Singaporeans who feel that our golden age is behind us and that the next 50 years will not be as brilliant as the last 50 years. And I would respectfully point out to Kishore that there's no natural law that Singapore exceptionalism will only last for 50 years. Why am I more optimistic than Kishore? And here I'm afraid I'm going to give you 4 points and not 3. I believe that our world-class human capital, our good governance, our multiculturalism, and our livability are 4 foundations which will ensure our continued success. And if I have to pick one of the 4, I think the most important competitive factor in the new century is human capital. Also, I have faith in younger Singaporeans. It's normal throughout history for older people to not have faith in the younger people. And this has been true since Aristotle. But I have faith in younger Singaporeans. This may be due to my happy interactions with the 600 students who belong to the Tembusu College of which I'm director, I form very positive and favorable impressions of our next generation. And based on this, I do not believe that the next generation of Singaporeans will squander the legacy which the pioneering generation had bequeathed to them. On the contrary, I want to believe that they will take Singapore to an even higher peak. I believe that the next 50 years can be as successful as the last 50 years. And it is not inevitable that Singapore will leave behind the exceptional progress of the last 50 years and recede to the normal. So on that optimistic note, I'm very happy to launch Kishore's 5th book, and I also urge you to buy them. And Kishore, I look forward to attending the launch for your 6th book. Thank you.